Alrighty, and we're on.
Cool.
So I'm here with Reid. I was just saying before because Richie Walsh likes to say Reid Reale, or it could be really Reale or whatever. But
Yeah.
Reid's pretty relaxed about it. It's actually probably more like Reid Reale now.
Correct, yeah, Reid Reale. Yeah.
So I guess for people that don't know who you are, how would you describe yourself? This is always an interesting question.
As in, what do I do?
Yeah, like forget about what you do.
Okay.
That obviously comes into who you are as a person.
Yeah.
But I guess how would you describe yourself if to somebody who doesn't know who you are? That's a very tough question.
Yeah, it is a tough question. It's interesting, because obviously you lean on what you do, but I don't know. I guess I like to think of myself as a martial artist and a scientist and a foodie.
Yep.
And it's interesting because that is kind of what I do, but it also is who I am. So I guess it's quite lucky that who I am is what I do as well.
Yep.
I like science and martial arts and food and adventure. I guess that's why I end up living in China and travel a bit.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into all that.
Sure.
I think actually I when I posted one of the stories of us after we trained the other day, one of one, and you used to have to dial modem to modem.
Yeah.
And it'd be chewing up the phone line, and then you could tell when somebody accidentally picked up the phone because your connection just froze.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, put the phone.
You just get your army built up, and then the fucking connection would cut out, and you go, oh, fuck it, let's go outside and play basketball. I actually said that to somebody the other day. They're talking about video games and that, and I said I used to love it when I was a kid, but I'm glad that by the time the internet and playing online and everything come around, I was kind of out of it because I probably never would have left the house.
Yeah.
Because I was a video game nerd when I was a kid, but we weren't all connected and everything, so
It's so addictive. Like,
yeah.
Well, with that particular mate, Adrian, like we used to play until like 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And it would be like, in school holidays, and then you go to sleep, and you wake up, and then it'll be like 11 o'clock in the morning. You just start doing the same thing over again, right? So it's a pretty big trap, right? But depending on what you want to do, right? Like I think now there are plenty of guys that can make a bit of a living out of it.
Yeah.
But again, that's the 1%ers.
Correct.
Right?
It's the same as pro sport, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, did you have any siblings growing up? Mm-hmm. Yeah. How many?
I've got 2 older brothers, so I'm the youngest. No sisters. So the middle one is 3 years older than me, and then the eldest one is 2 years older than him. So 5 years between us.
Yeah. So did you get bullied as the youngest?
I did, of course. Yeah, got beat up. I think the middle brother, I think he made me cry every day until I was about 12 or 13 from bashing me or teasing me or whatever it was. Yeah, he was a fucking nightmare.
Did that make you self-conscious at all? Like,
Yeah, I was a real fat kid.
Oh, yeah?
So, like I actually, It was funny, I did a jiu-jitsu comp a couple of weeks ago. It was the day before weigh-in, so I did a proper weight cut. And like I'm 93, 92 kilos at the moment. I weighed in at 84.
Yep.
And I thought, fuck, I haven't been 84 kilos since I was probably 10 years old.
10 years old?
Because I remember when I was 12, I remember stepping on the scales and being 90 kilos when I was 12. Like, big fat kid. Yeah.
And
so you get picked on a lot when you're the fat kid, right?
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Like, I'm just trying to picture, because that, like, 12, you also haven't gotten the height that you're at.
I was quite tall actually as a kid. Like now I'm probably like 183 or something, so I'm probably slightly above average. But when I was a kid, like I was the kid on the basketball team, the center, you know, the big fat tall kid.
Yeah, okay.
That
So
always
that was
play that position. Yeah.
And then what about your brothers? So your brothers were skinny, or?
They were both athletic. They were good at like the middle one, he was quite good at cricket. He played like, I don't know, some high level cricket, and the older one was good at a few different things. Basketball as well, but they were both they're a bit shorter, but yeah, more athletic. But now I'm obviously the most jack one out of all of them now. Yeah.
And then so then when it came to school, you know, like, so do you remember much about primary school? Do you have any fond memories of that, or?
Yeah, I mean, nothing particularly fond, but it wasn't terrible. I wasn't, you know, as a boy, it's always like, where do you sit in that pecking order?
Yeah.
And I certainly wasn't the cool kid, but I wasn't at the absolute bottom rung. You know, it's like you don't have to be the coolest, you just don't want to be the least coolest. So there was no issues there. I mean, everyone kind of bullies each other, but nothing bad.
What did your teachers say about you?
But I was actually good in primary school. Like I think I'm above average intelligence.
Yeah.
So I did quite well at school, kind of without trying, you know. One of those kids that probably didn't study that hard, but still got all right grades. And then, that was primary school. And then high school, you start hanging out with the wrong crowds and smoking the wrong stuff. And and then you kind of grades hit the skids. But yeah, no, primary school was, I did well. Yeah.
So then, when it came to high school, and I think everybody goes through this, right? I was the same. Like, once I hit like years 7, 8, and 9, it's like your parents give you a little bit more room, and then at the same time, you know, you sort of want to be a bit cool or whatever, so you sort of gravitate to doing whatever you want, really. And what's exciting when you're in year 7, 8, and 9 is always the fun stuff, never the hard work.
Yes.
Right? So it's pretty easy to, you know, get attracted to things that you shouldn't be doing.
Yes.
I guess, you know, for you when you were going through that phase, right? When you reflect on it, like, how do you think it impacted your life? Was it good? Was it bad?
I mean, it's all, if you like the way your life has turned out, then you probably have to be thankful for all the experiences that you've been through, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a positive thing. Like my parents separated when we were young, so like not having, it's very cliche, right? But not having that like male role model and stuff when you're younger and you're a young boy, and like you said, you're trying to be cool, and you grow up listening to hip hop and stuff, and you know, you're just you're a little bit lost. And it was funny actually, like I don't think when I was younger I knew anybody that had been to university.
No one.
You know, I hadn't come from a family like that, and that wasn't in my kind of in the realms of possibilities in my mind as to what I would be doing. I had no idea what I would do.
Yeah.
And I guess most of the people I knew were like tradies, labourers, you know, that sort of stuff. So like I certainly wasn't thinking long term that I've got to get good grades and then go to university or anything like this. So I think kind of fucking around and getting into trouble with all the boys just seemed like the fun, cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, you know, out of curiosity, and you don't have to answer this, it's too personal, but like, I guess, do you have a relationship with your dad now? Or?
Now I do not, no.
Yeah.
I probably haven't spoken to him. I haven't spoken to him since I was maybe 15. I seen him when I was like 18. Once I ended up in hospital and he come to see me, but I was sleeping, or I pretended I was asleep or something.
Wow.
And didn't see him, but yeah, it's all right.
So, like, I guess, you know, did you have a lot of resentment towards him, or?
Not at all.
Not at all? No?
No, it was just kind of like a neutral, like nothing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you don't really...
My parents separated when I was like 6, and then my mum, she was a really good mum, and you know, you hear stories of the mother turning the kids against the father and stuff like that. She was never like that. She fully encouraged me to have a relationship with my father, and in fact would like make us go out and see him, you know, every second weekend you got to go see your father, and if you don't want to go, you're not getting your pocket money and this sort of thing. But then that just kind of stopped, like 13, 14, like you said, you get to that age where you'd rather be out with your mates than going out to your dad's house. And then it just kind of died. But yeah, like no resentment towards him. I think he could have done a better job, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Maybe because I was so young when it happened. It's just kids are quite resilient and they just accept the world.
Yeah.
The way it is. Maybe my older brothers, have a little bit more.
Felt a bit differently about it.
Yeah, because they were a little bit older. But yeah, I wouldn't say I have resentment. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very good of your mum to be like that. Like I know there's when those sorts of things happen, there can always be resentment, right?
Yeah.
And then especially for the mums, like they're picking up all the load. And why I always bring that up is because I think mothers are really, not to say underappreciated, but it's like when you really sit and think about all the things that our mums have done for us.
Yeah.
If you got a good one, like granted there are bad mums out there too, right? But
yeah.
For those of us who are fortunate to have great mums, you're like, fuck, my mum did a lot for me.
Yeah, for sure.
And then mums can be a pain in the ass, like when they're messaging me like stupid shit, like my mum's like tells me shit like, oh, make sure you shave your face. I'm like, thanks, mum.
Okay, my never tells me that.
I've got an Asian mum, right? So she's like, when I was showing Richie the other day, and I said, this is the sort of shit my mum sends me. It's like, there was some thing about some lady who had a worm in her brain from eating unwashed vegetables that she'd foraged. I don't know if you saw that one.
I heard that. Was that in Australia?
Yeah.
I heard that the other week, yeah.
And so it was on the news, right?
Make sure you wash your lettuce.
Yeah. So my mum
shave your face and wash your lettuce.
So my mum sends me this message, which is like, don't eat unwashed vegetables. Got a case of brainworm. And my brother, he's 7 years older, and he obviously hadn't read the news or anything. Yeah. So he's like, what the fuck is a brainworm?
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's the kind of mothering that I get, right? Even as a 39-year-old man, I still get my mum, trying to mother me.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, mum, I'm over the stage where it's like trying to say, hey,
yeah, you just
sort of
accept
it.
Yeah.
And she's always going to be your mum, and it is what it is, and you just move on, right?
Yeah.
So then, okay, if you never had any of these role models in terms of the studying and the academics, how did that then play out for you then, in high school? So did you go straight to uni after, or what happened?
I dropped out of high school.
Oh, you dropped out?
Yeah, in year 10 when I was 16.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
To have a PhD.
Yeah,
and,
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about that. So what happened?
Yeah, it's a really stupid story and series of events. It's literally, this is what happened. There was a fight at school. Some other kids, people had a fight. And when people have a fight, boys have a fight, everyone gathers around and watches.
Yep.
Right? And that's all that happened, right? These two kids had a fight, everyone's around watching. There's probably 50 kids sitting around watching. And I remember the principal called me into his office afterwards and he's like, oh, Reid, you were out there watching a fight. I'm just like, yeah. And then he's like, that's a bad influence on kids that look up to you. And I'm like, I don't know why he thinks kids look up to me. Because, like I said, I'm kind of really in the middle of the pack. I'm not the cool kid or the loser. But, I don't know, maybe I had a certain group of friends where I was a bit of a leader or whatever. He said you're setting a bad influence, or whether he was saying the younger kids or whatever. But anyway, long story short, he's like, you shouldn't be doing that. And he's like, you got to have a weekend detention. You got to do a Sunday detention. Detention, right? Yeah. And I said, I'm not doing a Sunday detention. And he said, well, if you don't come in for the detention on Sunday, don't come back. And then I said, okay, I'm not coming back. And then I went home and I told my mum, and I'm like, I'll get kicked out of school. And she's like, what do you mean kicked out of school? And I explained. And I expect her to kick my ass, right?
Yeah.
But I think she was already fucking well and truly sick of 3 boys that are causing drama the whole time. And it's funny because then later in my life when I said to her, I'm like, why didn't you kick my ass? Why didn't you make me stay at school, Because I said to her, I'm leaving. And then she said, so what are you going to do? I go, I don't know. She said, you're going to get a job? I go, I guess. And she's like, all right, as long as you go get a job.
Yeah.
And then later, because I ended up going to university and whatever, and then I said to her, why did you let me leave school? Because most parents would not let their kid leave school. And she's like, if I told you not to leave, would you have listened to me? And I said, probably not.
Yeah.
And she's like, so, what am I going to do? It's like a losing battle type thing.
Yeah.
So I think my mum was big on, and she said this to us, it was like being a single mum, and she's not home a lot because she's always working.
Yeah.
So it's like she can't, and female 3 boys, it's hard to control them, yeah? So it's like she can't really order you around. She can just try to influence you. And so I think that was her thing, to just try and, I guess, teach us good values and influence us to do the right thing, but without being, she can't fucking lay down the law and be like, you're not leaving tonight, it's Friday night, you're going to stay home. It's like, no, I'm going to go and get pissed with my friends, right?
Yeah. What an amazing balance, right? It's one of those things where, as a parent, and I think about this with my kids, right? That if you're too heavy-handed, you obviously jeopardize your relationship with your kids. Over something that one day you're probably going to look back on and go, hey, that was really fucking trivial, right? But on the flip side, you don't want them to make mistakes.
Yeah, correct.
Like I wouldn't want my kids to make a horrible mistake or a horrible life choice, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you try and caution them away from that, but sometimes you really need to let kids make their own mistakes.
Well, it's funny, and it's not like my mum was trying to be my friend, because she always told me, she said, my job's not to be your friend, it's to raise you to be a like independent adult.
Yeah.
So I guess she just thought that was the best way to handle that situation, I guess. And because I ended up at uni, and when I had this conversation with her about why did you let me leave school, and she's like, I knew you were too smart to do labouring jobs your whole life, and you'd end up at university. And I'm like, fuck, I nearly didn't, I really went down the wrong route for a few years there before coming back. So yeah.
So then after you left school, and then did any of your friends from school be like, where are you?
I guess a lot of the people that I was hanging out with had already dropped out of school anyway.
Oh shit, okay.
So there was like, half the friendship group was still at school and half weren't. And,
yeah.
You're down the river fucking drinking and smoking and whatever. And so that group of friends are not not the ones still in school.
Yeah.
It was kind of no surprise. Yeah.
Okay. So then, did you enjoy any time off, or did you have to go get a job straight away?
I did go and get a job. You know what my first job was, which is interesting? I worked in a potato cake factory.
A potato cake factory?
Cake factory.
Hang on.
It was a factory in my hometown that literally made potato cakes and then froze them and would ship them around to, like, I guess, fish and chip shops and
so you're talking like potato scallops,
Potato cake. Yeah, in Victoria we call them potato cakes. Potato scallops here, is it?
We call them scallops, yeah.
Yeah.
So like the flat ones that are in batter.
Like mashed potato, battered,
Put chicken salt on them.
Yeah. They had chicken salt and vinegar flavour and all these different flavoured ones that they would make at the potato cake factory.
So what was your job? Were you there pressing?
I can't even remember. I was 16 at the time. It's like wrapping pallets, and I mean that was all done on the machines. It's just like putting things on pallets. I said, like, when I eventually a few years later ended up doing personal training and working in a gym, and I thought, like, I knew my life was going places when all the jobs that I was doing no longer revolved around pallets. Because, to that point, it's always like factories, logistics companies, abattoirs, fucking potato cake factory. Everything's pallets. You're wrapping pallets.
Yeah.
And, getting away from the pallets is good.
So, okay, hang on. So you covered off a few careers here. So did you actually work in an abattoir?
I worked in abattoirs for 18 months or 2 years, something like this. Yeah.
And just packing meat and stuff?
We were on the boning floor, so not the kill floor. Just cutting up pigs.
Yeah.
Yeah, labouring. Not a boner. I was never that skilled, but like breaking down carcasses and this sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And then what other jobs in between that before you went to PT?
I did heaps. Like I'll tell you a good story that's good for your podcast as to kind of what started to change the corner. So I actually, when I was 18, I think it was 18 or 17, going on 18. One night out on the drinks with me and my younger cousin, who also worked at the abattoirs with me. We went to this party, and as soon as we got to the party, everybody got kicked out, and we knew some people that were at this party, and so there was a group of people that were like mates of ours that we kind of knew, and then another group that we didn't know, and these two groups had words with each other.
Oh no!
And then anyway, everyone got kicked out, and we're out on the street. And long story short, didn't say a word to this kid. I ended up getting stabbed.
You got stabbed?
I got stabbed 9 times.
Where? In the, like...
Yeah, like in the stomach and all up the back. And I mean, it's almost 20 years ago now. There's one in the leg here, one in the armpit, one here. Mainly in the back is the bad ones. And my cousin got stabbed 7 times. But so then I went to hospital, and then I didn't work for like six months or something like this. Wow. And then there was this time where obviously that fucks your head up and whatever. And so then that's maybe what planted the seed that maybe I needed to change what I was doing in life.
Yeah.
And so eventually, maybe a year or so after that, because what happened was, this is also my mum, man, she's really good. When I was in hospital, she'd like bring me these books about working out and martial arts and stuff, because I was always into martial arts since I was a kid. But yeah, I don't know why she decided to do that, but I started reading books about working out and physical training and all this sort of stuff. And then in the course of like doing some rehab to get myself better after the stabbing, then I started to get into working out. And so that was kind of the start of, I guess, the transition into that kind of field. But along the way, before I went and did the PT certificates, actually, I think I might have already done the PT certificates, but it was hard to get a job in a gym or whatever. But I did a whole string of jobs for like probably a year or a year and a half before I actually started working in gyms. I did heaps of dumb shit, like moving, like, you know, like removalist stuff. Worked on a seedling farm. That's another funny story, like planting seedlings, you know, picking fruit, fucking bunch of different factories. Linfox, like logistics company. I worked for, this is an interesting one, a Japanese Italian frozen fast food, not fast food. Anyway, Caesarea. Do you know this? No. They've actually got them in China. It's this restaurant called Caesarea, and it's like Italian. It's like it's almost like McDonald's, but Italian food. Okay. So they have like pizza and pasta and that. But for some reason, so it's like a Japanese company. They have restaurants in China, and they have a factory in Melbourne for some reason.
Okay.
And but anyway, like I worked for these people, and I was like with a bunch of different, you know, recruitment companies, all labouring jobs all over western suburbs. Yep. Did all this dumb shit. And so I did like, I don't know, 10 or 15 different shitty labouring jobs for like a year and a half. And then finally got into working into gyms and stuff after I did the PT certificates.
Okay. Yeah. So hang on a sec. I want to go back to the stabbing part, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Like to get stabbed like 9 times. So what happened? Like after you got stabbed, you're obviously probably in shock, right? Like what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
And then did you pass out, or like how did you end up in the hospital? There's a whole blank spot there. That's what I'm trying to understand. Yeah. How do you go from getting stabbed 9 times to A, surviving, and B, you know, like 6 months recovery? Obviously, it was pretty severe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what happened after? Like when you've been stabbed 9 times?
It's a good story, man. This is great for your podcast. So basically, like I said, I didn't even know this kid from a bar of soap. And he turned around to fight somebody, and I was the person that was standing there.
Okay.
He was the kind of kid that, like, if it was the US, he would have shot up a school, right?
Yeah, okay.
But, like, when he eventually went to court, like, some of his friends testified against him, saying he was at a party showing everyone his new knife, and he's like, I'm so sick of this fucking town, I'm going to kill somebody tonight, blah, 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 all this sort of stuff. But yeah, anyway, he turned around and he threw a front kick. I was training Kyokushin karate at the time, and just started watching UFC. It was like... Tito Ortiz, Ken Shamrock days. Yeah. And I remember this kid turned around and front kicked me, and I'd never been in a street fight in my life. I still haven't. I've been in one fight, and I got stabbed 9 times. And I caught this kid's foot, and I look up, and he was so angry, and he's just like swinging like crazy, right? Yeah. And I caught his front kick, and then I'm like, all right, I guess I'm in a fight. So I punched this kid. But actually, what I think happened was, I think he turned around and kicked me and stabbed me in the gut straight away. Oh. But I didn't feel it, because it's like, it actually doesn't hurt, like, it's way less than a punch, right? Yeah. It just kind of feels like somebody poking you.
And you wouldn't even notice it until you look down. That's when the hurt comes into it.
Yeah, and so, like, I caught his foot, and I hit him, and then I ended up, like, I mounted him, and I was, like, punching him, and he just had his arm around the back, stabbed me in the back the whole time. Yeah. And I remember standing up, and I kind of stumbled away, and I looked down, and I felt like, I remember at some point I thought like, oh, that kind of feels like something sharp jabbing me. And I actually thought across my mind, and this all happened like in slow-mo, even though it was really fast. And I remember thinking, oh, maybe I've gotten stabbed. But then you think, oh, that's not going to happen to me. That happens to somebody else. You know, when you're a teenage male, you're bulletproof. You think nothing bad happens. Invincible. Yeah. But then I remember I felt all wet, and I looked down and I lifted up my shirt, and there was just red everywhere. Like there was just so much blood, and my jeans were just soaked. And then my little cousin, who was 16, he came running up and started fighting this kid. And I think he grabbed him behind the head and was punching him. And this kid was just like stabbing him all up the front. And then I'm like, shit, I'm all covered in blood. And I'm like, Chase, my little cousin's name is Chase. And I'm like, oh, this kid's got a knife. And I've come over and I've gone to separate them, like to pull my cousin away and push the kid. And I remember, cool, right? It's unreal. But yeah. I separated them, and as I separated them, this kid's just gone fucking bang, stabbed him like straight like this, like right in the chest. Oh. And my cousin's gone like this, and then he's like opened up his hand, and this blood is squirting like 2 or 3 meters, just squirting out of his chest. Fuck. Yeah. And then and I remember and then I just lay down on the ground because I'm like, fuck, this is pretty bad. I'm like, and the kid just ran. The kid just ran away, and there was like all commotion. And yeah, I remember I was thinking like when we're kids, we're told like if you ever get bitten by a snake, you got to be calm, you know, so the blood doesn't rush and all that. And I thought, shit, I'm losing a lot of blood here. And I thought like, oh, somebody will call an ambulance. I'm like, I should probably just be calm. So I just lay down on the ground and just thought somebody will call an ambulance. And somebody called an ambulance, and and eventually a helicopter come and took us to the CBD. But yeah, it's funny talking about the mums and that. Like I always say this when I tell this story. It's like I was laying on the ground, and the first thing I thought was, okay, fucking hell, my mum is gonna kill me, right? Because I'm like, imagine she gets the phone call. It's like midnight on a Saturday night, and she's like, and she already
been stabbed 9 times, like.
Yeah, she's gonna be like, what's this dickhead up to, you know, like, yeah. So I'm just laying there, and yeah, and then my mum eventually come down, which must have been traumatic for her. But it was funny, like I thought I was gonna die, and I remember thinking, I'm like, holy shit, I'm like, this is a fucking terrible way to die, right? I'm just laying on the side of the road in some shit town, like stabbed by some kid I don't even know for no reason. I'm like, this would suck. And it was funny. It was like it was this near-death experience, because I remember like it was like there's all these crazy people are screaming and there's all this chaos, and like my vision starts to get like all dark, and you know, it's like the peripheral vision's going away, and I thought, man, I'm gonna die here, and I think maybe even I seen the light. I think it like got real dark and then really bright, and I'm not religious or anything, but there was something like this, or just blinding pain. But and all it was like the volume was getting turned down. I remember this clearly. It's like the volume was getting turned down and the vision starting to black out, like you're kind of fading away. And then I just remember I go, no, I'm not going to die. It's going to be okay. And then it went like everything just kind of come back to life. And then I could hear all the screaming and stuff again. And then I just lay there. It was fucking painful. It was like, because all these wounds, there's like cramps, and I had a punctured lung. And so it's like that scene on Terminator where he's holding the bomb and he's like, like the shortness of breath. And he can't breathe. And so, yeah, it was fucking painful. And then we went to the hospital, and yeah. I was only in hospital for like less than a week, like maybe 4 days or something.
Really?
But I think my cousin was there for like 10 days. So I got stabbed 9 times and got a punctured lung, and everything else kind of missed. But my cousin, he only got stabbed 7 times, but he had punctured lung, liver, spleen, kidney, and stomach. Like he was real fucked up, and he had like the big zipper up in where they had to open him up and operate. Yeah, like staples and that. Yeah. So then, yeah, I don't know where we went with that, but it was kind of like that. Then made me think that.
You got to do.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's right. You come back to the story. Yeah, and so maybe that was the beginning of why I thought I should actually use my brain. And but also it was hard, because then I tried to go back to work at the abattoirs after that when I was good. And like I was so injured that it was hard to lift pigs again after that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
then when
kind of forced my hand.
When it goes to that sort of point and you're trying to recover through exercise, like. How did you try and fix those sort of injuries? Because it's like the muscle tissue's punctured, right?
Yeah.
Did it just over time? I'm guessing it obviously just reconnects back, and then
I guess.
the scar tissue, right?
Yeah,
you
I guess.
Work through that. Any loss of mobility or anything like that?
I don't think so. I think I've had problems since then, which you would be a fool to think are not related. Because everything's kind of related, right? And so I've had shoulder injuries and neck injuries and stuff. But I mean, everything's kind of chicken and egg. You don't really know.
Which one was first?
And then you start training jiu-jitsu and your whole body's fucked from training jiu-jitsu. So you're like...
We're going to get to martial arts, Now, you also mentioned there was when you were doing the seed planting job, that was interesting. What was interesting?
No, I just remember this one. Jeez, you're good at picking up on the little seeds here, actually. No, I just remember I did this job for 1 day.
Okay.
And they put us on a truck and they drive us out of town, and there was like this big property out in out in these paddocks in the hills of this town where I lived, that the seedling farm must have owned, and they're planting like a forest that they're going to harvest in however many years or whatever. And I just remember I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere planting these seedlings. And I can't remember how long I did it for, a couple of hours. I just thought, fuck this. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm sitting, you have this device, it's like a long stick with a little spike on the end that you kind of put the seedling in, and then you like step it and stab it into the ground, something like this, and you're just out there for hours doing this thing, stabbing these seedlings. And I remember I just go, fuck this, and I threw the thing on the ground and I just walked off. And I'm just like, I'm just going to...
Wait, how did you get back?
Well, that's a funny thing, right? Because I thought, like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I thought, I'm just going to, like, go back to town, because, like, there's this one road that goes out into the hills. And I'm like, all right, I'll just walk back to the road, even though it's probably, a couple of kilometres over the hill, because that's where they dropped us off. I'm like, I'll just go back to the road, and then when I get on the road, I'll call one of my mates to come pick me up. And I get out there, and I got no reception. So then I'm like, fuck, I'm going to have to walk back to town. And I'm walking back to town down this long road. And it took me hours.
The bus would have gone past.
Well, that's the thing, because I'm thinking, I kept not getting reception, and I just said in my mind, I go, I have to make it back before the end of the day, because I'm not going to get paid, because I just walked off on work.
Yeah.
I'm like, if these guys drive back and beat me back to town, I may as well have stayed there, because I would have gotten back early and at least got paid.
Yeah.
But I can't remember how many hours it was, but I ended up calling one of my mates, and he picked me up. Yeah.
Oh, fucking hell.
Yeah. I don't know if that was the last job that I did. There was probably other stupid ones, but I did all the labouring stuff as well: bricklaying, roof tiling, roof plumbing.
Yeah.
My mate was an electrician. All that sort of shit. You just help your mates out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you then moved into doing the PTing side of things, right? So
Yep.
obviously you did the PT course.
Mm-hmm.
Was there
Cert
any
3 and
other...
4 in fitness.
Yeah, Cert 3 and 4 in fitness. How long did you spend doing that before you decided that you're going to take it further?
Yeah, I can't remember. Maybe a year, 2 years, something like this.
Yeah.
And then I start... Actually, no, because I did it concurrent when I was at uni, but I probably worked in a gym for a year or so, and then decided that I really enjoyed learning about physiology and anatomy. And then you get into bodybuilding, and like, again, being an overweight kid, learning to, manipulate your diet and count your macros and all this sort of stuff. It's really interesting. And I just thought, like, maybe I should do this further. And so start investigating university courses and this sort of stuff. And then, I think I worked in the gym for about a year, and then got into a degree in Geelong at Deakin University, Health Sciences, majoring in exercise science, nutrition and biochemistry. So I went and did that, but I kept working at gyms, like part-time job, while I was at uni doing that. So, yeah.
And did you find that transition to... Because you didn't finish high school, right?
Correct.
So, obviously you would have gotten some of the stuff through doing the PTing certs. But, like, did you find it a big jump from there to go to uni, or did it sort of help you bridge?
A little bit, because not really in one sense, because again, without sounding like a wanker, I'm probably above average intelligence, so I can kind of pick things up quite well. So that was no problem. And when like a lot of people, when you're into something, you can understand it quite well. Yeah, and you're obsessed. And like even at uni, I didn't really study. Like I just went to the lectures, read the books, watched whatever I had to watch, and that was it. And then it was kind of in there. I didn't have to like sit there and go back and do the questions and refresh and do study groups and all that. Like I just kind of got it. It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But the one area that was difficult was chemistry, because
Okay.
I dropped out in year 10, so I did no chemistry. Most people do year 11 and 12, maybe you do chemistry.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in
I
like...
dropped out of chemistry. I think I did it in year 10. Year 11, I was like, I can't fucking do this.
Well-
I probably didn't help. I didn't get along with my teacher, and I just gave up.
Yeah, it's it was daunting, because like first year at uni chemistry, and I got like after the first 6 months I go, fucking hell, this is hard.
Yeah.
I thought this is really like not easy.
Yeah.
And then I thought, because in the beginning I'm like, what do I want to do? And for some reason I decided to be a dietitian. I'm like, because I'm interested in both. I'm like, I want to do like S&C or physio or nutrition, something like this. So I kind of studied fairly broadly, but I also had my eye on like a endpoint. And I just had to look at different ones, and like dietetics was the one that you can do like a degree, and then you do like a master's, and then after that you can be like in the US it's a registered dietitian. In Australia it's accredited practicing dietitian. Then you can work in a hospital and charge Medicare and whatever. And I just thought, I don't know, maybe I don't know why I had this logic, but maybe it's more niche and there's less people doing it compared to like everybody that I spoke to wanted to do S&C or wanted to do physio.
Yeah.
And maybe I was just slightly more interested in nutrition,
Yeah.
but I'm interested in all of it.
Yeah.
But so I wanted to do that, and to do like a nutritionist compared to a dietitian is like quite a big difference, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, to be a dietitian, I needed to do this master's, and then you have to do chemistry to get into that. Like there's certain prerequisites you need, so that's why I did that. And after the first 6 months of chemistry, I thought, fuck this. I go, this is too hard. I said, I'll just be a nutritionist.
Yeah.
I'm like, I won't do dietetics. But then when I got my marks back, from that first semester, I got like a 60 or a 65 or whatever, and they're like, you only need 50 to pass.
Please get degrees.
Yeah, and so I'm just like, oh, okay, if I can squeak through with the chemistry, I'll be all right. But it actually gets easier as you go along, because like the first, you learn like basic chemistry, covalent bonds and fucking charges and this stuff. But as it goes on, it becomes more specific. It goes like organic chemistry, biochem, then, like much more kind of relevant to what you would be interested in if you're doing nutrition or ex-phys. So yeah, it's good. And I like chemistry. It's actually, it's fascinating, right? It's like the way that people understand the world. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think it's like that building on foundational knowledge is one of those things that we really take for granted. Like when I say that, and the reason why I always think about this is because, you know, I've got my kids are going, well, my oldest is going through year 1, and you're trying to help them to understand the concepts of like addition and subtraction, or even just when it comes to fluency in reading, right? Like she can read the words, but then does she actually understand and have the comprehension to put together what does it mean?
Yeah.
And, you know, when I started thinking about that, I'm like, fuck, we take so much for granted. That we just, you know, we've got all this assumed knowledge or this foundational knowledge that as we get older, you know, it just like you rattle off, you know, your simple addition or subtraction, and you can do it in your head.
Yeah.
But, you know, she's there trying to understand how to do the counting over tens on your fingers. And then, you know, like for us, I think for most people when they have that basic level of maths, it's like you see the patterns.
Yes.
You know, an 8 and a 3, well, that's going to be an 11 somewhere, whether it's 21, whether it's 31, you know, 28 plus 3 is going to be 31. You know, like you see the patterns. And for them, you know, they have to build all of those patterns. You know, they have to learn to count by 5s, and then it's counting by 3s, and understanding that if you add 2 odd numbers, it becomes an even. If you add 2 even numbers, it becomes an even. Right? Like, you know, when we think about it, we go, oh, it's pretty basic stuff. But then it's like, how do you teach that to a child? Right?
Yeah.
And then like, how do you actually make them to recognize those patterns? And then I was thinking about it from that perspective because when kids fall behind, right, it's because they didn't get this foundational, it didn't click for them yet.
Yeah.
Right. But once it clicks, it just makes everything else make sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same way, you know, when you talk about chemistry. Yeah, like I didn't get past that initial step of where it just sort of clicked into place. Like I did physics and I did engineering, but I just didn't like chemistry. I probably didn't have the interest in it. But it was just one of those things that didn't click for me.
Yeah.
So, you know...
And just following up from that, you're right about that. It's like getting that foundation, like you said, with the kids, and the ones who it doesn't click for might struggle later on. And that's like, because people say to me, it's like, do you use chemistry? Like, you know, today? And it's like, not really.
Yeah.
But it's like having that, I think having a deeper level understanding of stuff kind of like bullshit proofs you against fad, kind of in the nutrition field, against like fad ideas and things later on. Because like to somebody who doesn't have a deep understanding, when they, you know, somebody gets on Instagram and talks about the carnivore diet or this diet or that diet, and they come up with a plausible mechanism as to why it works, people go, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if you understand the underlying chemistry, you can straight away spot why it doesn't make sense and why they're kind of full of shit. So it's like, yeah, definitely having those the foundational understanding helps.
Yeah. It allows you to sort of revisit the concepts from first principles, right?
Correct.
I think, you know, that's part of the scientific method, is that you want to try and approach each problem with a fresh set of eyes, you know, and of course you don't want to be having to fact check or redo every single bit of analysis that's been done.
Yes.
You want to be able to read a study and then go, okay, that study sounds like it makes sense.
Yeah.
I can use that as a baseline hypothesis or a baseline understanding to then build upon that, right? So then after you did your masters, like what made you then want to go that extra step further to do your PhD?
Yeah, I never thought I'd do a PhD. I finished my master's degree and then started looking for jobs, and I worked for a company in Melbourne called Corporate Bodies International.
Corporate Bodies International.
Yeah, which is like a health and well-being, like a corporate health and well-being company, I guess. So what they did was they would do health and well-being programs, education, interventions for different corporations and industries. And it was largely off at the time, I don't know if it's still going, they had like this work health check program going where it's like, I started off doing this before I got a full-time job with them. You'd go to a workplace, like it could be a white collar or a blue collar workplace, and you do like a finger prick cholesterol, blood glucose, blood pressure, whatever, you know, write a little health passport for the people. And it was like a government scheme to like give people a heads up about their health. And if companies got certain, like let's say 50% of their workforce to do this, the government would then give them a grant like $10,000 or $20,000 to spend on health and wellbeing programs.
Oh, wow.
And so that could be like nutrition education, you know, step challenges, boot camps, like all this sort of crap. So so a large part of the business for these Corporate Bodies International was coming from that. But some other companies, like mining companies, were a big one as well. Like, you know, they spend a lot on this sort of stuff. And so this company would provide those services to a bunch of other companies. So I did that for a bit, and yeah, it turned out dietetics wasn't what I thought it was, you know. Like everyone's interested in sport, but it's hard to get a job doing that. Yeah.
It's a niche, right?
It's a real niche, and it's like, it's hard to crack, you know, get into it. I did some like volunteer work. I worked for like the Melbourne Rebels rugby team at some stage as a dietitian, but then when they found out I was like a brown belt or a purple belt at that time, I was also teaching some jiu-jitsu and stuff as well.
Yeah.
But then what happened was I went to the Australian Institute of Sport to do further education, this sports dietitians course. It was only a 4-day course, but you have to have your master's and your bachelor in that in order to do this course, and you have to have been working in the field for a year and have some sports experience or something like this. So I was in Canberra doing this course and talking to other dietitians and whatever. There was some kid, I forget his name, but he's like, oh, you like martial arts? He's like, have you seen the PhD scholarship that they've got on offer? And I'm like, no, I never heard of this, because I'm not on the university websites,
trawling.
Like, trawling this. But some people are, like some people get off on this stuff, and I was never the typical uni guy. But yeah, so basically I think it started in 2013. I started in 2014. I think this scheme started in 2013. The Australian government had a big push for combat sports because, like we were chatting the other day in the car, like there's an analysis on the Olympic Games, and all the top countries, like the top 5 countries in the world or top 10 or something, they all have big combat sports programs, and they all get medals at combat sports.
Yeah.
Because just like so we're talking weight category sports, but most of the weight category sports are combat sports. There's a few others. There's like lightweight rowing and weightlifting. But just in the weight category sports alone, it's like 25% of the medals, something like that, because there's so many different weight divisions, and you've got males and females.
Yeah.
So like you just think like judo, like I should know this, but let's say there's 6 weight divisions in each.
Yeah.
So that's 12,
Yeah.
like males and females, and then you've got 3 medals in each.
Yeah.
Like, what's that, 36 medals just from judo?
Yeah.
And then there's like another 4 combat sports.
Yeah.
So anyway, the Australian government had this push for that, and part of this was they were making this centre of excellence at the Institute of Sport called the Combat Centre.
Yep.
To centralise some of the performance expertise, so the nutrition, strength and conditioning, physio, skill acquisition, all this sort of stuff. And so the AIS for the past 20 years had this PhD scholarship program, not just with the combat sports, but for all sports, where they would get scholarships from the universities. You come and do your research at the Institute of Sport, but then you basically work as a slave for the AIS for the duration of your PhD, because normally with a PhD, you're at a university, you're teaching classes, doing tutorials.
Yeah.
So I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
I was based at the Institute of Sport in
research,
Australia. Well, you just do the research, but instead of giving back to a university, you just work for free with the athletes. So they get a free dietitian for combat sports.
Yeah. Okay.
They would only give the scholarships to people that were already qualified experts.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this kid said to me, did you apply for this scholarship? And I said, I didn't even know about it. And then he brought it to my attention, and the applications had closed. But I, because I was at the AIS, I sent an email to the woman who was running the program or whatever. And I said, hey, is this thing still on offer? I'm at the AIS now. And I went and met her, and I walk into the office with a gi. And she's like, oh my God, you've got a gi. And I'm like, yeah, I'll go training after this and whatever. And they got chatting to me, and I guess they thought I was the person for the gig. So I had to do a bunch of interviews and whatever, but I don't think there was really anybody else that they were looking at. So then I started that. I just did the PhD because I thought, like, to be honest, like I wasn't that interested in the research, but I thought if I do this, I'm going to have 3 or 4 years experience working at the AIS with the combat sports. And should help me get that foot in the door in sports. But at the end of it, I actually quite enjoyed the research. And it's good. It gives you something to kind of work on long term over your career, give back to the scientific community and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was good.
Was it a good feeling when it's like, oh, I'm a published, I got a published thesis?
The thesis, not really. Your first paper is nice.
Yeah.
Because people do it in different ways, and like in chemistry, like I got mates that do like proper science, exercise science isn't proper science. It's like playing around science, It's like
the gauntlet's been thrown.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong.
Well, it's like, like if chemistry and physics is here, psychology's here, which is like not even really a science, and then like exercise science, I guess, is about in the middle somewhere.
Definitely thrown down the gauntlet. You're gonna have all these psych guys come up. Reid, what are you talking about? We're real scientists.
But yeah, I mean, that was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but yeah, I got mates that did chemistry, and like they take years to publish a paper.
Yeah.
So it's like they might finish their PhD and then publish a paper the first year after their PhD, whereas in sports science you can kind of knock them out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So mine was like a thesis by publication, so I already had like 4 published articles by the time I finished my PhD.
Yeah.
So the PhD, the actual thesis was a bit more of a formality than anything. Yeah, and the joke is like the only person who reads your thesis is like your supervisor and your mum.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't even think my mum read mine. So
the person marking it, right?
Yes.
That's the only people that
yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's. I want to segue because let's talk about martial arts because I feel like we need to sort of talk about your martial arts journey because this is about where they're going to
Correct.
go like this, and
Yeah.
we're going to sort of see that intersection in terms of how we come to today, right? So, what was the first martial art you started with? Kyokushin karate, was it?
No, to be honest, I can't remember. I would have been like 6 or 7, some wacky karate, you know, like there's so many different ones, you know.
Yeah.
John Tiger's Hapkido fucking Shoujo or something. I can't remember. Was that like at the local primary school?
Yep.
You know, on the dance floor, the
the
basketball,
hall, in
the hall.
That's how I started.
Doing your fucking these
Kata.
ones,
Yep.
yeah. So I can't even remember what that was.
Yeah.
But yeah, some karate.
Okay.
And then I did a bunch of other ones. I trained I think I did Taekwondo a little bit, did a little bit of judo, did a little bit of like kickboxing or whatever it was, you know. They didn't call it Muay Thai again. It was just like some random one in a hall. But I actually trained ninjutsu for a couple of years. Kevin Hawthorne's ninjutsu in Victoria. I think I did that for like 3 years from when I was like 11 to 14 or something like this.
Yeah.
I learned nunchucks and, you know, you wear the fucking ninja mask and stuff. And so that was a bit, but that's just one of these pyramid scheme martial arts, right? Like my mum's like, another belt again? And how much does it cost?
Ah, yes.
Like this sort of stuff. So, yeah.
The commercial, that was a lot of the schools back then, you know, they were always looking for ways to, I remember like, I don't want to get was it the GKR guys, the GKR karate guys?
Yeah, that rings a bell actually, yeah.
Ryu, I think it was. Apologies if don't sue me for defamation.
Yeah.
If I've got the wrong school, but I do remember it was like a very aggressive sales approach. You know, knocking on the door.
Yeah.
Would you like to join our karate club? You know, and you'd see them running around and.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
I don't want the karatekas to come after me.
I think it was GKR actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just very commercialized, right? Like it was just one of those ones where it was like. Not to say that you wouldn't get any quality instruction. I'm sure there's probably quality instruction in any of those traditional styles, but it's just what are you training for, right? Like are you training to get a belt, or are you training to actually develop some particular form of skill, right?
Well, it was funny, even doing ninjutsu, even when I was like 13, like I had this epiphany, because it's like, I remember I started at the same time as some other guy. I'm like, 11.
Yeah.
And there's this guy that's like 20 that started, and we both trained for like 3 years, and my mum couldn't afford all the belts. She could afford a lot of them, but not all of them. And this other guy went to all the gradings, and then he ended up being the black belt. And now this guy's running the class, and then the instructor like pisses off to set up the next pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wait a minute, we started like the same week, and now this guy's running the class. Like, how does this work?
The belt factory.
Yeah, the belt factory. So yeah, and then like 17, 18 was Kyokushin until I got stabbed. I'm not sure if I went back after that. I think I did go back a little bit after that.
Were you like, this didn't fucking help me?
No, it didn't. It didn't help me. And it was when I moved to Geelong to uni that I was actually thinking of getting back into Kyokushin because I went down the rabbit hole and partying and whatever after getting stabbed. But when I went back to uni, I thought I wanted to do Muay Thai or get back into Kyokushin. But I actually just met a guy randomly at a gym I was working out, the gym that I ended up working at actually. And this guy was skipping, talking about he had to lose weight. And I'm like, are you a boxer? And he's like, no, I've got a BJJ comp. And I'm like, BJJ. I'm like, you watch UFC 1 and whatever. And I'm like, I didn't know anywhere where you could train BJJ.
Yeah.
This must have been 2006.
Yeah.
And he's like, there's a club just down the road, you should come. And then I went and I was like jacked, like 100 kilos and jacked. And I got choked out by a 40-year-old, 60-kilo man 100 times. And I thought, there's something to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the rest is history.
Do you prefer training in the gi or?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like no gi.
Yeah, it's just one of those. Look,
it's not to
say I don't like it. It's just
You prefer gi?
I prefer no gi.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just my fingers just get fucked.
Yeah.
Like
these are not good.
See, look at the knuckles on.
These ones.
Yeah, look at those two. For people on the camera, have a look at that. Check out those fingers. That's what happens if you train in the gi. Now, Finn Canning, because I know Finn Canning's one of the guys that I sometimes commentate with, and he's a very good competitor. He's the guardian of gi over at GE, but that's the future for you, buddy.
Yeah. My ears are all right though, huh?
Your ears
been
are
like
up
16,
okay. A lot of
17
time,
years.
It's the gi that like causes a lot of the collies because it's like you rub against the fabric and it just flares up.
It's also just an individual thing, like because I know guys that in their first year of training are getting cauliflower ears.
Yeah.
And I've had like started when I was like 21, so it's like 17 years or something. I've only had like 2 cauliflower ears and just like drained them and clamped them and they've been good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you wear ear guards sometimes? Or
Never.
Never.
Yeah.
Well, I think it could be a genetic thing too, right? Like,
yeah.
Is there something
like the shape of your ear or something. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So in terms of jiu-jitsu, like, like the quality. Well, let me rephrase that. Not to say the quality, but the style of jiu-jitsu teaching has changed a lot. You know, obviously over the years. I guess for you, when you reflect back on, you know, how class was taught when you were learning versus what you're seeing in terms of the coaching nowadays, like what are your sort of reflections on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the biggest differences, and I live in China now, so like it's a bit different over there as well. But one of the biggest differences is like when I started, you know, I think it was quite rare for people to just be full-time coaches and have a full-time gym.
Yeah.
So it's like the guys I used to train with, one was a painter / security guard, and then he would teach jiu-jitsu at night, and then another guy was a school teacher who would also do some jiu-jitsu. So they didn't really try to make money out of it, you know. They were just like training, and obviously there's, I don't know, whatever reasons why you like coaching, a bit of ego involved, and also passing on knowledge and whatever. But that was like the motivation. So it's like you didn't necessarily have to cater to people's people's desires of what they wanted the sport to be in order to keep them paying memberships to get the money coming in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know this when I'm coaching. Like I like to coach the way I like to coach jiu-jitsu and what I believe jiu-jitsu is about and the way it should be. Whereas now it's like, particularly like you'll notice it in China, right? Like if you're in Shanghai, the rent's pretty expensive. And you got to have a successful business. So you've kind of got to give the people what they want instead of what they need, I guess. You're always like, there's a little bit of that because you're trying to keep people coming. But like that's a big one. It's like when we started, it was just like, you know, fucking escape side control for 30 minutes and you just hate your life. You know, you're just on the bottom there with a fucking shoulder in your jaw for 30 minutes. And like we just do that every night.
Yeah.
And like people these days don't want to do that shit. Like that's not going to keep the members.
It's building toughness, but it's not wallet friendly.
But I like that kind of jiu-jitsu, you know. So that's one of the biggest differences. But I don't know. There's that, and then there's obviously it's better now because people are like the top guys that are coming out of it are better. They've got better techniques and more broad skill sets and whatever. I don't know. I probably maybe used to be tougher. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's like, because now it's like a lot of people want to come in and just learn techniques, cool techniques, do your berimbolos, you know, fucking
the flashy stuff,
Danaher, whatever, and you learn all that stuff and that's great. But then I guess the people that really want to, you know, compete a lot and be tough, like they'll do that by themselves anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas I think back when we used to do it, you were forced to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And if you didn't like it, you just wouldn't come back.
Yeah.
So it's like people would start, they would train for a month or two, realize they didn't like this, and then they would leave.
Yeah.
And through a process of elimination, you just end up with a bunch of people that want to cross-face each other all day.
Yeah.
You know, whereas now it's like you get people that don't want to cross-face each other all day, but they still do jiu-jitsu. So
right.
yeah, but I mean, there's a lot more drilling. I fucking hate drilling.
Yeah.
Like doing just over and over and over. Like I just want to roll.
Yeah.
I just want to
Let's
roll.
get into the fun parts.
Yeah. I just like rolling and situational sparring.
Yeah.
But maybe that's why I can't do any leg locks and haven't learned anything new in 5 years.
You just get to do situational leg lock sparring. Like
yeah, I mean you should, right?
Yeah.
But so I like controlling somebody and passing a guard and, you know, kind of dominating somebody. Yeah, cook the beans a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's funny. Okay, so at the end of your time at the AIS, so what did you then move into from there?
Yeah, so when I finished my thesis in Canberra, I moved back to Melbourne and I was there for a bit. I was still getting paid my scholarship. What did I do? I had a few I do like some online nutrition coaching and stuff, teach them jiu-jitsu, but started applying for jobs all around the world, like just thinking, what can I do?
Yep.
And there was a position that come up in the US for GSSI, Gatorade Sports Science Institute. So like the drink Gatorade, they have a division that do sports science research.
Yep.
They don't do research on the drinks. People always ask that. It's just like general sports science research. We do nutrition, we do ex-phys, we do sleep, like whatever. It's just like, I guess it's a long-term, I guess it's marketing in some sense from the brand Gatorade, which is part of PepsiCo. They just think if we, you know, do all this sports science research and get known as like a like a credible voice of or source of research. It just like builds brand credibility for Gatorade to be like, the science-backed sports drink or whatever. But it was good company. Like we did cool stuff. There was like
Wait. So you're doing all this research, but you're not necessarily doing research on the drink. Does that mean that the drink doesn't work?
that research is so rock solid that it's like, I mean, it's. I'm not saying the drink's awesome, but it's just like it's sugar and water and salt. There's not that much.
You can't go wrong with that, right?
Yeah, there's not that much.
Okay.
We know if you lose water, you need to put it back in.
Yeah.
We know sugar's like good for energy.
Electrolytes.
And we know that you lose salt in your sweat. So it's like it's a fucking open goal to say that water with sugar and salt in it is going to be good for you when you're dehydrated.
Yeah.
Like But they're smart. Like they would sponsor all these conferences around the world and stuff, and they would get like really smart people to write stuff on their behalf and kind of brand it GSSI and all that. But anyway, I applied for that and had a series of interviews and ended up getting that job. Like it's quite a good thing to put on the resume, right? Like so now, and then I'm with the UFC, so it's like the Australian Institute of Sport for like 20 years was known as like the world leading hub of sports science research. GSSI is like a massive place, and then obviously UFC is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty strong resume. GSSI there's really nice company, really cool people, lots of resources. They got a shit ton of money, like it's PepsiCo, right? But we work with US pro sports, basketball, football, baseball, all this shit that I don't care about. Like, so yeah, like it was just a nice job, and it relocated me to the US. Got to live in Florida for a couple of years.
Yep.
And so.
What was that like? Because very different to obviously, Melbourne and Canberra, right?
Yeah. Florida's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of jiu-jitsu over there as well, so that was cool. But a bit slower pace. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like when I first moved to the US, I thought that it's going to be similar to Australia. I'm like, Western country, like 50% white people, 50% not white people. Everyone speaks English, kind of same shit. But it's quite different, like the religion, the politics, the guns, how expensive healthcare is, how cheap everything else is. Like you go to Walmart, that's pretty cheap. I don't know. It's a good experience. Not in the rush to move back to Florida though.
Yeah. So then, how did you go from GSSI to the UFC?
Yeah, so it was quite nice for me. I actually applied for jobs with the UFC when they first opened up, but somebody else got the director role. But then when I moved to the US, there was a manager role that come up with the UFC that I applied for again, and I had interviews for that. But then the money I was on at GSSI, which wasn't fantastic, but it was decent. The UFC were not willing to pay that for that role, so I didn't get that. But I kind of already knew the guys from then. And then when they opened up the facility in China, they kind of approached me and said, hey, are you still interested? Like, there's another role that's come up in China, probably more in line with the pay scale that you're interested in.
Yeah.
But also what was cool for me was that even before I spoke to anyone at the UFC PI, the research that I did in my PhD, they were already like using this because we kind of wrote the guidelines, like evidence-based guidelines for cutting weight and recovery and all this stuff.
Yeah.
They were already using that for their kind of protocols that the UFC PI would use for fight week and stuff, like the stuff that we do now. This week with the guys here in Sydney. Like that was kind of, I don't want to say based on solely my stuff, because my stuff is based on the wider research, but they like cited a lot of what I did, which is kind of nice, because again, like most people do a PhD, nobody fucking reads it. You end up go work something else completely different, whereas like now I basically do the exact shit that I wrote in my PhD every day with athletes, so it's quite professionally fulfilling. Yeah,
well, you're seeing the proof in the pudding, right?
Yeah, it's good.
Does that, out of curiosity, does that then also make it a little bit boring? Like, because like you've done it so many times and you did your research on it. Like, I'm just curious whether.
It ends up just like, no matter what you do, it kind of ends up like a day in the office, right? So yeah, it's like, I wouldn't say boring, but yeah.
It's a process. Like
it just ends up a process. But then you kind of like elevate like above that. Like the stuff we do fight week, like Charles Stull, my colleague who's a new director in Vegas, like he's awesome, right? Like the stuff that he does, the difficulties in his job is not the dealing with athletes and what to feed them. It's the logistics of working with the chefs, working with the hotel, traveling all around the world. Like it's that other stuff. The science of like getting somebody to lose weight is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
So that stuff doesn't become challenging, and that's just a process. But it's like all the other moving parts that make it difficult or interesting. But what's cool about being in China is all the cultural aspect of it, right? So that's another layer of complexity as well.
So, yeah, I guess, for you, did you have much experience with Chinese culture before you moved over there?
Not really. Almost nothing. I mean, Australia has a lot of like Chinese people, and you're aware of Chinese culture. But I'd travelled all over Asia, but never China actually.
Really?
Yeah. So I didn't know what to expect.
So when you just like, was it an easy decision to go? Okay, I'll just go to the PI. Like, when they offered you that job.
It was because I was in Florida, and they said we're going to pay you like 50% more than what you're on.
Wow.
And we're going to fly you to Shanghai. And then I seen Shanghai, and I'm like, this city's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
It's way better than where I was living in Florida, And it's weird because I actually feel more at home in Shanghai than I did like where I was in Florida. Because Shanghai is like international city, similar to Melbourne or Sydney, something like this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like reverse Australia actually.
Yeah.
Because like in Shanghai, if you're a foreigner and you don't speak Chinese, you can kind of get by.
Yep.
And there's it's a big city. It's got everything you need. All the street signs are in Chinese with kind of English subtitles, whereas like Melbourne and Sydney is kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
It's like mainly non-Chinese, but still has a lot of Chinese people. And if you only speak Chinese in Melbourne and Sydney in the city centre, you can probably get by,
But it's tough. Yeah.
And but I mean, it's the same in Shanghai. It's like most people don't speak English, but you can kind of get by, like with translation apps and most things that kind of maybe have some English subtitles. Like here, some of the street signs have Chinese and whatever. So it's it's interesting. But yeah.
Okay. And like obviously the UFC PI in Shanghai is like it's a huge investment from the UFC's
Yes.
behalf, right? When you look at the athletes that are coming through that, I guess like culturally, obviously the way that they would approach the sport and all of these sorts of things would be very different to Western athletes, right?
Yes.
Do you mind talking a little bit about that or?
Yeah, I mean it's just different. Like they're a few things. One's like the professionalism is a bit different. Like I think like they don't have the same idea of like being a 24-hour athlete. It's just like go to training, do your competitions, but then aside from that, they're kind of just like normal people. Whereas like, these are extreme examples, but your Kobe Bryant or your LeBron James, that's
it's a 24/7 job.
Yeah, that's like doing your rehab, doing your prehab, making sure to get sleep, making sure your mattress is perfect, like timing your steps or your bloody sleep cycle, like all those little 1%ers that add up. They don't really care about any of that stuff.
Yeah, wow.
Like some of these guys still smoke cigarettes. They're out on the beers and eating whatever they want. Like, so there's that side of it. So that's a bit hard, is the professionalism there.
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of make them understand. But that's also like a cultural thing in general. Like, because they've got different ideas around the relationship between food and sleep and training and like how that impacts. Your body or your physiology. I think a lot of them don't necessarily think that, like with the guys in our academy, they can all, and this is the same for people everywhere, you could get 100 people, put them all on the same training program, have them all eat a similar kind of diet, and yet some guy will look jacked and some guy will look like a typical office worker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's because of genetics, but also people regulate their appetite a bit differently and they've got different backgrounds and all that sort of stuff. Whereas there, I think like the same thing. It's like there might be the jacked guy, and they don't think he's jacked because he worked hard. They just think like, oh, that guy's jacked. I could never be jacked.
Yeah, okay.
It's like, well, maybe if you stopped
Did
smoking
everything else
cigarettes and did everything right, and
Yeah.
did what we told you, you could look like this guy.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of like just like general awareness and education around physiology and stuff. Like nutrition's really hard there.
Yeah.
That's like out of all the kind of areas, all the performance areas, that's probably the furthest behind the West. Is the nutrition, and number one, it's just like not understanding. Number two, the Chinese medicine beliefs kind of get in the way of it a bit there. So there's that side of it, and then there's also just the level of the sport. Like they don't have the background that the Western countries do with like involvement in MMA. It's still a fairly new sport there, but catching on quickly, and there's a lot of money there on the local scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like the professionalism and the level of coaching and the number of athletes and stuff is not quite there yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting, I think China's an interesting example because for many years, like contact sports, like contact martial arts was sort of, not to say the word forbidden, but like it wasn't really culturally acceptable would probably be the right way to put it. So, people would train martial arts and that's why they have like this whole development in terms of wushu and that side of things. But Sanda was sort of, always the smaller piece of the pie.
Yeah.
But I think, over time now we're starting to see a lot of those influences sort of fade away, and people are getting more involved with mixed martial arts and combat sports in general. But I think, for China, it's also a bit of like an identity thing when it comes like culturally, right? Because, you have like all of these traditional Chinese martial arts, like Tai Chi and, where it's the Shaolin styles or whatever the case may be. And like, they're important from a cultural piece. But the problem is that when they're not being developed and refined with the end goal being combat or being tested in combat, that's why they develop these different systems which look beautiful. Like wushu, when you watch a really good wushu practitioner and they're doing all the acrobatics and the flips and the jumps, it's like, this is beautiful, but is it applicable? Like, because the end goal of that versus the end goal of combat are two very different things.
Correct.
Right? And so now it's like, there's a weird sort of thing where it's like it's sort of blending the two now. Like most people that do wushu will do sanda as well. So then for people that don't know, sanda is basically Chinese kickboxing. It's pretty much like kickboxing rules, but it allows takedowns, but no like grappling or striking on the ground, so to speak. So I think that part of it is very, very interesting because when I look at some of the things that happen in terms of like how traditional martial arts is sort of represented, it's sort of like, people are very proud of that cultural heritage, but then at the same time, it's like, it's hard to then promote it because if you're looking to find the best combat athletes, you need to be participating in combat sports.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So that's a pretty sort of interesting piece that I think about and this is from I trained Chinese Kung Fu for like 20 years of my life, so I think I'm fairly qualified to say that, right?
Yeah.
And then for you, like when you go over to China, like as this white guy, basically, now you're in this foreign, Eastern country, Chinese embedded in Chinese culture. Like, has that changed your outlook on certain things?
I mean, of course it has, because the more experiences you have in life, the more perspective you get. But I think I was fairly like open-minded and aware of the world, and like travelled a bit and quite interested in different cultures and different ways of being. Like if you had have grabbed somebody else from my hometown and thrown them in China, it probably might have blown their mind a bit more than myself. But yeah, like I said, I think I was already quite open-minded and aware of. Like I travelled to Asia a lot and then lived in the US and South America and Central America and been around enough to kind of know the world's not the same as the town and city that I grew up in. So it wasn't like a complete fucking spun me out, but for sure it would have changed my perspective on things. One of the interesting things was I thought, having never been to China, but like I've been to Japan a bunch of times, spent like a month in Korea with our judo team when I was at the AIS, live in Thailand and Bali for a bit with like when I was riding and training and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know, I maybe had the impression, and also you think you grow up in Australia, it's like before, now there's a lot of kind of anti-China media, but when we were kids it was more just like, oh, China's this rapidly developing country, developing super fast, AI, computers, technology, sort of similar to Japan in some sense.
Yeah.
And so you think like, oh, it's probably like another East Asian country where everything's super efficient, people are disciplined, people are on time, everything works like a finely oiled machine. And then you get to China and it's basically the opposite, right? It's like, can be a shit show in many regards.
That's right. The plane's boarding. Where's the line? There's no line. Like it's literally like you just force your way to the front and you shove your ticket in the flight attendant's face and you just go, let me on the plane.
It's basically whatever like the stereotype of Japan is, China's like the polar opposite. Yeah. So that was interesting actually.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's like it really annoys you in the beginning, but then you just kind of learn to accept it. Chabador.
Yeah.
Like,
Chabador.
Yeah, like it's we'll have like a Olympic team coming to train with us, and they'll be like, all right, we've got 20 athletes and we're arriving on Wednesday. It's like, all right, let's plan all this thing, and then it'll be like 50 athletes arrive on Monday, and you're like, hold on, there's like double the number of athletes that you said were coming, and you're 2 days early. It's just like Chabador. They're just like whatever. Wow. And it's like this is just the way a lot of things work. It's like things just change at the fucking drop of a hat. So like it can be quite annoying as a foreigner when you're used to think. And Australia's not even that rigid and disciplined, right? Like Australia is pretty easygoing as well.
Yeah.
But it's just like it gets a bit annoying because you're trying to plan for something. You're trying to like plan, organize, execute, but like things can change so fast
Yeah.
that sometimes. So that's why you see, and like when everybody acts like this, that's why people don't bother planning.
Yeah.
Because they know if we plan for something,
It's
it
not
can
gonna
just
come.
change next
Yeah.
week anyway.
Yeah.
So they're like, let's just wait and then just like make it up on the spot, like
Yeah.
sometimes. But it's not all like that. Some things are super organized and planned,
Yeah.
but it's just kind of weird to you know, like as a foreigner, you don't know what is hyper organized, planned and strict and rigid, and what's completely chabaldor, do as you please type thing. You know,
Yeah. Well,
some aspects of the society and the culture are like the Wild West,
Yeah.
and then other things are, you know, hyper regulated, super regimented.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit difficult to navigate sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. What was I going to comment on? I was going to comment on that. Yeah, so like when you're talking about the athletes and how some, you know, in terms of the discipline around like sleep and eating and like those healthy habits kind of a thing, you know, for them, it'll be like, oh yeah, good enough. Like I've done enough, right?
Yeah.
But then, you know, and I guess the contrast to that would be like I'm trying to think of the story about the British cycling team, and then they had that coach that came in, and it's the summation of aggregate gains, right? Where they went through their system, and then they go, we're going to find all the 1%ers.
Yep.
You know, simple things like, okay, like let's make sure the athletes know how to wash their hands properly.
Yeah.
You know, to try and prevent illnesses so that they can stay training, and then let's make sure that their sleep is optimized. Let's make sure their diet is optimized, and it was all of these little 1% things that then made such a big difference when they went to compete at that next Olympics.
Yeah.
You know. And I think that's something that only comes with time, right? Like it's as they start to get sharper and sharper, and people are looking for those next level edges. You know, like at the moment, it's almost like it's like an uncut stone, right?
Yes.
So anything you chip away, it's actually, you know, made a massive improvement.
Yeah.
But once you start getting to the pointed part of the spear, it's like, okay, it's so fine, the sort of adjustments that you need to make.
It's also different sports and different sports systems. Like cycling is basically physiology, right? It's just like, it kind of comes down to genetics and correct training. There's like little decisions that need to be made from the athlete.
Yeah.
And I guess there is heart, like how can you push yourself? But I mean, people can push themselves, right? When you get athletes, like they all push themselves as hard as they can.
Yeah.
So it's just like, you got to have the right genes for it. You got to like find the people with the right genes and then train them hard. And if you can optimize all the little bits, then you win. But you know what fighting's like. I mean, look at John Jones, you know? Like, he's not doing everything right. So like with fighting, there's a bit more, there's like more to it in some sense, like, but less to it physiologically sometimes. Like, I don't know, hard thing to describe, but for certain sports, all that stuff, you know, is like I noticed at the AIS, like with the top fighters, particularly boxing. Like boxing's one, and also MMA now. It's like sometimes there's a negative correlation between how professional somebody is and how good at fighting they are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They're too strict.
Because like the people that count all their macros and weigh everything and do it, like they get in their own head too much, and they're like not that talented. They're not as free and creative and that sort of stuff. So it's a bit interesting. And then also with the different sports systems, like Australia, the UK, it's like smaller populations. You got to kind of do more with what you have.
Yeah.
But in China, like weightlifting or whatever, it's like, all right, let's just put 10 million people into the meat
find the
grinder.
freaks.
Half of them like can't, or 90% of them get broken and can't make it. But then the ones that pop out the other end win your gold medals. Like Korea's the same with like judo and that, right? It's like eggs against the wall. You just throw all the eggs against the wall. The one that doesn't crack, send to the Olympics. Like, yeah.
Well, I think combat sports, especially mixed martial arts, it's one of those ones where there's so many axes, you know, that make a fighter great, right? And like purely from a technical standpoint, like I like talking about this concept where, you know, if the horizontal axis is basically your skill acquisition, you know, how many tools have you got? So how good, like how many weapons have you got when it comes to jiu-jitsu? How many weapons have you got when it comes to wrestling? How many weapons have you got when it comes to your striking? You know, and then you sort of like plot that on an axis of how much breadth of attacks or tools that you have. And then the vertical axis would be your technical depth. You know, how actually good are you with your boxing? You know, are you like Mayweather with your boxing, or are you just like a guy from the amateurs, right? And if you then like move that across all of the all the disciplines, basically you've got 4 quadrants in terms of where athletes are. Now, ideally, you want to be that athlete that's operating. You know, you've got all the different attacks, and you're really technically good at them. But I don't think the sport is becoming like that now, but that wasn't how the sport started. The sport started with style versus style.
Yeah.
It was literally, okay, I'm a specialist in this versus the specialist in that. What style was better? And now we're finding, because people have got more of the tools, it's like, okay, well, if my tool here is a little bit better than that person's tool in the same category, maybe that's where I need to take the fight. Then you go and add in the things like, okay, well, how good am I at weight cutting? You know, can I be the bigger person on the day? Is that strength advantage going to play to my advantage?
Yeah.
You know, all of those sorts of facets that come into it. And I reckon that's what makes combat sports so cool, right?
Yeah. I mean, for sure, it's got to be the most complex sport in the world, right?
Absolutely.
It seems to be without question that MMA is the most complex sport.
Yeah.
Like it's all those physical things and technical things and tactical things, and then the psychology of it's just insane.
Yeah. And then you get like a freak who just, you know, throws whatever.
Yeah.
But can make it work.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's just I almost I've got this analogy, you know, coming up in one of my next fight studies where it's like, you know, sometimes when you watch a particular fighter, it's like you look at their style and you go, oh, that's an awkward style. But it's almost like, you know, you're trying to read something in a different language.
Yeah.
You know, because the way that they view the sport is just very different to how you view the sport.
Yes.
Right. So it's like, you know, when you look at it from a boxing lens, and you're trying to apply a boxing lens to somebody that's a Muay Thai fighter, you go, oh, you wouldn't do that. You know, your leg's exposed. But you can't look at it like that. You got to look at it through their lens to try and understand what they do. And I think part of the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because, you know, you probably have like these guys that come out of like Mongolia and some of these other, you know, smaller countries or smaller, I guess, minority groups that probably have like, so the Mongolians obviously have the Bok wrestling culture. I'm sort of curious, you know, like how do you sort of see those guys fitting in with the whole development, and I guess, you know, do they bring something different in terms of how they approach the sport?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that, and obviously I'm not the perfect person to speak to this about. I'm the fucking nutrition guy. If you spoke to our head coach, he'd give you much greater insight. But it's interesting, like most of our athletes are these ethnic minorities in China. Very few Han athletes.
Oh, really?
You know,
Yep.
I don't know the numbers, but it must be 2/3 are not Han, whereas like 90% of the Chinese population is Han.
Yep.
Whereas most of our guys are the three big ethnic groups are like Xinjiang guys, like a lot of Kazakh guys, a lot of Inner Mongolian guys, and a lot of Tibetan guys.
Yep.
These are the three regions that most of our fighters come from. So yeah, I mean there is no like, I guess like Chinese style. Like I think they're all fairly MMA. Definitely like the Xinjiang and the Mongolian guys have a more wrestling heavy style.
Yep.
And the Tibetan guys, but they're all from one gym.
Yep.
All the Tibetan guys from
really?
Enbo in Chengdu.
Okay.
There's actually a movie that's just come out in China about this gym.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a bit famous, and there's a Vice documentary. If you type in like Vice, China's orphan MMA boys or something like this, there's a Vice documentary about this gym where a lot of our fighters come from. There's like Song Yadong, Suma Darji. All these guys come from this one gym in Chengdu.
Oh, there you go.
And but yeah, so they're like more striking. So it's, I don't know whether it's like that part of China or it's just that gym.
Yep.
But yeah, certainly like the Xinjiang, the Mongolian guys a bit better at wrestling, and the other guys are more striking. But a lot of the guys as well. Actually, I don't know a lot, but some of our athletes also come from the sports school system. So they might have done a wrestling sports school, a Sanda sports school. I think there's even like kickboxing sports schools and this sort of stuff. So that's kind of interesting as well. Yeah.
Do they have a very different approach when it comes to their diet and things like that because they come out of sports school, or it's still much the same?
No, it's trash. Like they there is nobody connecting the dots.
Yeah.
With nutrition, and well, I can't say nobody because I haven't investigated
you
everything.
just haven't come across them yet.
Yeah, but it's just like their awareness of it is just basically zero.
And then, like,
so and when there is awareness in the Chinese Olympic system, it's probably more there's a foreign coach there that's
who's driving
trying to drive it. Yeah.
When it comes to like the food prep, then is that more difficult because of like the guys want to eat Chinese food, or?
Well, not really, but it's they like, so at our facility we have a full-time cafeteria that feeds the athletes all their food, and me in my role obviously oversee this. So we have they're all Chinese chefs. And they cook Chinese food, and we try to get them to cook like some of the regional style of cuisines to make the athletes happy, and we just set parameters around how they're supposed to do it. Basically, it's like less oil and better cuts of meat.
Yeah.
Because that's like typical Chinese food is like super oily, and the meat's kind of all shitty.
Yeah.
It's like, they like the cuts that are like a lot of fat, a lot of bones, not much actual meat. Whereas like we're trying to get the protein up and kind of get the fat down with most of these guys. So it's like they still get to eat the food that they like. That's just kind of tweaked a little bit, but they still do complain about it because they want the food to be dripping in oil.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's more just like that they miss their mums cooking, or they miss their
the
their villagers cooking type stuff. So all of our guys, after they have a fight, they go back home, they come back, a month later, fucking 10 kilos overweight. Like it's bad. Like that's a big thing as well. Like I've never seen athletes blow out so bad as these guys.
Yeah. And
like some of them are unbelievable. And you think like, you were gone for 4 weeks and you put on 12 kilos. Like, what are you doing? You know, like
Paddy Pimblett style.
Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, and this is more out of self-interest, right? When it comes to chili.
Yeah.
What's your sort of view on that in terms of like, does that have any sort of impact, or doesn't really matter? The guys can have as much chili as they want. Like, it doesn't really,
See, look, because that's an interesting thing. Like, that's like, we're trying to educate them, but it's hard, right? Because it's like, I mean, basically it's like you're trying to like lose body fat. The idea is like, how can we make it as least, like, to suck as little as possible? Because what would be nice is if you can just make some slight tweaks to your existing food.
Yeah.
The food is like, it's like you make like low-fat desserts and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, you still get to eat the foods that you like, but we just tweak it a little bit. But their idea is like, I just eat boiled vegetables and boiled meat.
Yeah.
And I can't have salt, I can't have garlic, I can't have chili, which is obviously bullshit. Like, chili's not going to make it hard for you to lose weight.
Yeah.
So it's like, we're trying to do that, like, educate them and show them how they can still have the foods that they like.
Yeah.
It's hard for even Westerners to get that.
Well, that's like the bodybuilding diet, right? Like boiled chicken and rice, right?
Yeah, I mean, but not now. Like, I don't think guys that fully understand to do that stuff now. But yeah, I mean, because that's a common one. They say, I'm trying to lose weight, no chili, right? And I'm like, I don't know where you guys got this from.
Yeah.
But obviously, well, not obviously. To me, it's obvious. But yeah,
WeChat,
that's
man.
wrong.
Like,
well,
they
I mean,
must have the
but it's funny.
on
It's
WeChat.
funny because in the West, it's like people say, chili makes your metabolism fast. Will help you lose weight, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's certainly interesting. I mean, but it was hard. Like, when guys first start, there's like, the hot, cold foods in like Chinese medicine and stuff. And so they're like, we can't have fruit after training because it's I don't know what particular fruit is, but it's a hot or a cold, and I'm not supposed to have it after training. Yeah, but the weird thing is, depending on what region they come from, it's all slightly different anyway. So to one guy, this is a hot food. To another guy, it's a cold food.
Yeah.
So like, obviously it's not real because it can't be both.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing.
I'm like, if only there was a way for us to, like, systematically answer questions as to what's real or not. It's the scientific method, which is like what
you probably have to
humans
get
do.
those guys from different regions and be like, okay, let's talk about it. Yeah. Pull out an apple. Is this hot or cold? And then go. So guys, if you don't agree that these ones are the same, like, who's right?
That would require logic. And that's something that doesn't exist sometimes. Yeah.
All right, let's switch gears one last time before we sort of wrap things up.
Sure.
I'm always curious about people's worldviews now, especially when it comes to like faith and religion and that sort of stuff. And it's a
meal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason why I bring this up now, when I reflect on you getting stabbed and seeing the light and things closing in, obviously that elicited a change in terms of how you perceive the world, and in terms of I don't want to go out like this and have this all I've done, right?
Yeah.
So I guess for you now, having garnered all these experiences and traveled all these different countries, like, how does that shape your worldview in terms of like, this wild, crazy ride that we're on?
Religion and life and death and stuff.
Yeah, like, on mortality. Like, how do you view your own mortality and like?
Well, I mean, how do I view my own mortality? That's a deeper question. But like religion and stuff, I have zero faith at all, and I'm 100% convinced that
There's nothing. It just goes to nothingness.
Yeah, it just goes to nothingness.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so.
But it's still like, I mean, technically you have to be agnostic.
Yep.
Like, you don't really know.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, we could be in the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
For all
Could
we
be
know.
a simulation.
It could be a simulation.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't really know, but I believe there's nothing, and that when you die, that's it.
Yep.
Just the same as when a plant dies or your dog dies or whatever dies. I'm quite fascinated with religion though. Like, I like learning about it and everything, but they're all, I mean, again, they're all contradictory as well, right? And even contradictory within the one religion sometimes. So yeah, I don't think any of that's real.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and so how does that influence your own mortality? Like,
so I don't even really know what that question means. Like
when you think about, like, does the idea of death change the way that you approach life?
Yeah, I don't know. Does the idea of death change the way that you approach life?
Because it could have all ended when you were...
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess like I don't know. It's like meaning of life and stuff like this, right? It's like, do you have a purpose or not? Like I don't see a overall point to it all.
Yep.
You're just trying to. I mean, in some sense, we're all kind of selfish, and even if you want to do selfless things to help others, it's because you get some sort of gratification from it or whatever. But I guess you're just trying to. It's that old thing of like. Well, I was going to say like, avoid pain and go towards pleasure.
Yeah.
But then, martial arts and jiu-jitsu and training is not really avoiding pain.
Well, we've turned that
we've
into a
reframed it, correct,
yeah.
exactly. So I don't know, I think that's what it is, and it's in different ways, like you do things to help people that you love and that you like, and but that makes you feel good about it, and you do things that you try and avoid things that you don't want to do. Or not that you don't want to do, because many times you're doing the things you don't want to do because you know it's the right thing to do. But I don't know. It's not a very good answer. But nah, I don't really think about it. I think it's just like
enjoy the ride while it's there.
Enjoy the ride, yeah.
Yep.
But it's also like I think it's like Peterson talks about this. Jordan Peterson, it's like there's the present you and there's the future you. So obviously it's like this calculation of like, I mean, I could just fucking belt heroin in my arm and like eat fucking donuts all day because it's sensory pleasure, but then you're gonna fuck the future you, right? So it's this balance of like, all right, you obviously have to delay gratification at some point for certain things, but the idea is like, how can I enjoy my life the most for the longest time possible? Is I guess what it's about, and health's a big part of that as well, because you want to be healthy enough to enjoy it for longer.
Do you do any of the like? Are you into any sort of longevity protocols or anything like that?
Nah, I think just I'm interested. I'm not like, it's funny, like the same with jiu-jitsu, it's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Yeah.
It's like the same with science. So like, I'm interested in that stuff, but I'm not an expert in it. But I'll watch documentaries or read stuff if it's put in front of me to try and understand it. As far as I understand, none of that longevity stuff is really panned out or is as effective as all the fads and Instagram posts and everything make it out to be. Like I think like, maintaining a healthy body weight, exercising regularly, eating fruits and vegetables, not smoking, alcohol in moderation, like all that boring stuff.
Yeah, the basics.
Plays the biggest part in longevity.
Yeah.
And then your genes is the biggest one probably.
Yeah.
Because,
right.
There's the people that fucking smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day and live to 100.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I mean, I certainly like that sort of stuff, like eat a shitload of vegetables, and like the big one with me is not sleeping enough probably. But in terms of all those other things, I'm probably ticking those boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever like get one of those sleep trackers, like an Aura Ring?
Yeah, I've used that stuff before, because we got given them at work, but I lost it. But yeah, for me, like I actually sleep all right. It's just I don't allow enough time in bed because it's like sometimes you finish training 9:30.
Yeah.
And then you got to go home and then have dinner and then unwind, and then it's midnight before you go to bed, and you got to get up at 7, so that's probably not enough time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I actually I gave a talk at some little conference CEO group. Actually, we're giving a presentation to this group of CEOs. This is in Shanghai, about like high performance and longevity and stuff. And there was me talking about like nutrition for performance. All these like Tim Ferriss wannabe CEO guys that want to, maximize, hack their bodies and whatever. And so I just talked about nutrition. My talk was interesting, actually. I talked about like how elite sport is not elite health.
Yeah.
And people see these athletes doing all this crazy stuff and think, I want to be like this guy. It's like, well, this guy's actually probably shortening his lifespan by performing at that because they're redlining their bodies, right? But also on the same night presenting, there was this woman, I forget her name, Evelyn somebody. She's like a top longevity researcher. I think some university in Switzerland, but she's based in Shanghai at a longevity hospital there because there's so much money there, right? Yeah. There's a lot of people there wanting to spend money on this stuff. Yep. And so she gave some presentation about the current state of the longevity medicine and all the bio tracking and stuff that they can do. And basically it's like, there's a lot of like good diagnostics now. We still kind of don't know what to do with all this stuff. We think maybe one day we will. And I asked her all the questions about the, MNN and the, what's the like metformin and all this, and she's just like nah. It's like me with supplements. When people talk to me about nutrition, is it keto? Is it fucking BCAAs? Is it this? I'm just like no. Don't be fat. do some exercise, eat your vegetables.
Yeah.
Like just boring stuff that you've heard
people-
before.
people
And she
want
was kind of the same, right?
Yeah, because people want the silver bullet.
Exactly.
Right? Everybody's looking for the silver bullet, this panacea that's going to change our life. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, there's got to be an easy way.
Yeah.
When the real answer is just do the fucking work.
And it's like everything in life is do the basics well.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's the same in martial arts.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, is there the secret choke that'll get everyone with? It's like, no.
Yeah.
Like, you know, get your guard back, pass the guard, sweep the guy. Like,
it.
it's all the basics. Yeah.
All right. I just thought of one other thing that I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned that you have this love of food,
Yes.
right? Can we just quickly talk about that? I know you said you were a fat kid.
Yeah.
Was there a particular, I guess, what fueled this love of food? Is it just?
I mean,
Well,
I think
what is it about food? First of all, is it like
it's delicious.
Okay, yeah. So it's purely the taste factor, right? Taste, texture, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Also, like you know, like novel, interesting things. Like that's good.
Yep.
Like I love a curry, right? Like some good Indian curry with rice and bread. You kind of can't get better than just like good curry with rice and bread and a beer.
Yeah.
But like it's not that interesting.
Yeah.
You know, so there's like that's kind of comforty food. But then you also like to go to some wanky restaurant that costs you $400 where it's all fucking truffle foams and you know whatever. Yeah. So that's cool as well. Like I like it all.
Eating a bubble.
Yeah, like I like their super interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But also the delicious stuff and everything in between. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any particular place that you often think back fondly on and go, that was fucking amazing?
Mate, I mean, just being back in Australia now, like I think I said to you the other day, and we went and had banh mi. Like that's one of the things. I had Vietnamese food last night as well. I went and trained with a mate in Bondi Junction. But yeah, like I growing up in Australia, I loved the Vietnamese food, right? And when I moved to China, I thought like, you know, it's in the middle of Asia, 25 million people, borders Vietnam. I'm going to be sweet here, and there's no good Vietnamese food in Shanghai. So I do miss a good banh mi, Nu Lan in Footscray. Yeah.
There you go. All right. If people want to, do you want people to reach you? I don't know if you do.
No, they can. I'm not very good on social media. I have an Instagram. That's my name, Reid Reale. That's probably the best way.
Okay.
If people are interested in the research, you can go on Google Scholar and type in my name.
Yep.
There's all the research and stuff there, and that's probably it.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool, Reid. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, brother.
All right. Have you enjoyed it?
Surely did.